Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final oral presentation of this year. My name is Anita, and today my group and I will be talking about the best practices in error correction. What is error correction? When is it the right time to correct? What are some challenges in error correction and the best practices to do so? Furthermore, we will also take a deep look into error correction techniques and how to apply it in a teens class with a B2 level of English. In order to do so, we will be expanding on different concepts that are paramount for the understanding of the overall topic, such as error, mistakes, feedback, correction, and B2 level according to CEFR. To begin with, we should start stating that according to the official CEFR guidelines, someone at the B2 level in English can understand the main ideas of complex texts on both concrete and abstract topics, including technical discussions in his or her field of specialization. They can also interact with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes regular interaction with native speakers quite possible without strain for either part. They can also produce clear and detailed text on a wide range of subjects and explain a viewpoint on a topical issue given the advantages and disadvantages of various opinions. Correcting all of the errors that can be made during a conversation or in a writing activity can be sometimes quite challenging, especially if you're not really sure of what is an error. An error is something that your students don't know because they haven't learned it yet or they have forgotten it. This is where your students need you the most in order to effectively correct their errors and help them develop their language skills. Many people tend to think that errors and mistakes are the same, but actually they're not. A mistake, on the other hand, is an accident or a lapse, something that your EFL or ESL students actually know and that they can mostly likely self-correct if given the chance. This can be a typo, using the wrong word, or a small grammatical mistake. According to Corder, it is of paramount importance to study students' error, as this can have immediate practical applications for foreign teachers. By this, Corder means that errors provide feedback. What is feedback and why is it so important? Well, in a very widely cited educational article, feedback was described as one of the most powerful influences on learning. Feedback is information that the learner receives about their language learning and most commonly refers to information about their language production, speaking and writing. Although it can also concern reading and listening, study skills, attitudes, efforts, and so on. Therefore, the main objective of L2 teaching is to develop the ability in the learner to communicate in the target language. What is certain, however, is that errors are an integral part of learning a second language, or is a natural part of the learner's gradual movement toward the development of communicative competence. And he or she should be allowed to make certain types of errors which do not gratefully affect their communication. In the development of language teaching, particularly in the teaching and learning of a second or foreign language, there are many theories. Murphy confirmed error correction as feedback and argued that correction is a form of feedback to learners with regards to the use of the language. Essentially, it is neutral and may describe success or failure because language in use exploits both form and function. It may be concerned with accuracy and fluency too. Giving correction, the teacher attempts to help and improve learning. Indeed, learners are reported to want correction and find it useful. Following Edge's discussion on error correction, he then found correction to be a reminder, informational, and helpful through providing feedback, and he discussed the function, objective, and the aim of correction in a language learning and reported that correction is a way of reminding students of the form of standard English. Now I'm going to leave you in excellent hands. My partner Paula will be expanding on what error correction is, its challenges, advantages, and disadvantages, and which are the best practices of it.
Thank you very much, Anna. Let me introduce myself. My name is Paula, and I'll be talking about the theoretical background of the topic. First things first, what is error correction? By definition, is the technique of comparing the system output to the desired output value and using that error to direct the training. But what does it mean to us, the teachers? It means that we should be ready to detect those errors uh, in our students' speech, not confuse errors with mistakes, and be able to correct them in the right timing to avoid different interruptions of fluency in their speech and learning processes. So that brings us to the second questions we all may have. When? When is it time to correct? Should I correct it immediately? How should I do it? There is a clear need to give corrections, however, the impact of too much feedback can also be detrimental to students' motivation. This makes more important to prioritize which errors to correct. When considering errors, Hendrickson suggests correction based on students' ability, starting with errors that affect commutation, then common errors, and finally errors that will irritate. Following from this, it is clear that you will need to correct beginners different from advanced students. Furthermore, it's worth considering abstaining from correcting specific errors until you have introduced that area of knowledge of the students. For example, if you were correcting sentences for students trying to use past continuous when the students are still coming to grips with the simple past. Teachers should correct mistakes based on what the students have previously learned rather than errors they use from trying content they are yet unready for. In this line, Chandra's work, which summarizes students should be corrected with their errors, is the focus of the lesson. It is also important to correct mistakes when things previously studied, as peers hearing the mistakes will question their understanding of what they previously learned. It seems like a lot to assimilate. So this brings us to the second question. What is it for? What are the advantages of this? Asking students to try to correct their own mistakes before you help them is a great way to practice it because it helps students to recognize their own fossilized errors that are errors that have become a habit or a part of the student's repertoire and use subconsciously as if it were the correct form. In other words, mistakes that make without even being aware of. Recognizing them helps your students to develop their critical thinking skills. Correcting students' error is necessary in order to develop students' improve the skills. It is always a risk as a teacher to take when correcting students in oral communication that the student will be reluctant to try again in the future. Correcting the output of the students appear to have some effect. So the primary concern with errors is their communication difficulties. That's when we ask ourselves what are the challenges of using error correction. Avoid overcorrecting if the learner cannot self-correct, and try other members of the class. Try not to correct everything. The students are learning the language to be able to communicate with the outside world. So let's try to put it in context. In the case of a writing activity, here are some practical techniques or ideas to correct a writing. Training students to read is very important even though they have invested time in doing their writing task. Students often don't spend a few more minutes checking their writing. The following activities not only help develop student activity, editing skills in a fun way, but also enable the teachers to focus on the key errors without individual students losing face. For example, grammar auctions or mistake mazes. Here are some correction techniques. It can be difficult to decide what or how much to correct in a student's piece of writing. Our students can develop a negative attitude towards writing because their teachers correct all the errors, or if the teacher corrects only a few, they might feel the teacher hasn't spent enough time looking at their work. Here are some examples of correction techniques that we can use in order to develop their skills applied to writing tasks. Correcting errors with correct form at their place. Using codes in the margin to identify the type of errors, for example, BOC for a lexical error. Then students have to identify the errors if it's possible to make a correction. Alternatively, putting crosses in the margin of the number of errors in each line, then the student will try to identify the errors and make the corrections, providing the students with the opportunity to give and receive peer correction too. They correct each other's work using one or more of the techniques above, and from time to time giving students an individual breakdown recurring problems in their written work, scaffolding each part of the activities using prompts for it using the introducing the writing task. It's a good idea too. This way we will be helping to develop our students' independence in order to create their own motivational skills along with their English persona. Now let me introduce our last but not less important partner, Rafael, that is going to bring some practical activities and applications to the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita and Paula. I will now be speaking about moving from theory to practice. So we'll be discussing some practical techniques for correcting spoken and written English. First, on the spot correction techniques. They are used for dealing with errors as they occur, but we have to be careful not to embarrass anyone. Explicit correction. The teacher in this technique just corrects an error as it happens. Recast. So the teacher reformulates utterances and prompts for self-repair, which in turn include non-verbal cues. It could be hand gestures to signal the wrong tense. Metalinguistic clues, so it means that the teacher asks questions to indicate an error, or open-ended questions. In this case, the teacher asks general questions to check understanding. So when correcting errors on the spot, the early stages of a lesson may last a little longer, but doing so allows learners to obtain a basis to work from later. Also, key points can be written on the board. Second, delayed correction techniques. These are used for dealing with errors after they occur. They include noting down errors, focusing on each student mistakes or the class as a whole, recording, so the teacher can record a task and revisit that recording later, and reteaching. This means that a principle can be retaught, and also additional practice might be needed, or a particular lesson or mini lesson can be presented later. Considering the profile of the class, which is a B2 level teenager class, we have designed an activity which will focus primarily on accuracy, formal speech, and written production. And it includes the following. First, a university admission letter, which is a written exercise, and in turn it's a two-step activity. First, students pen down a brief but formal letter to a fictional university. Rubrics are given beforehand. So the teacher, for example, writes some formal expressions on the board as a guide, but students are encouraged to be creative about describing and explaining the reasons why they want to apply for that particular university. Second, and probably this is the most important part, students perform a self-assessment. So the teacher shows a sample letter to the class on screen, or hands out can be given to the students. They are also given a checklist to base their correction on. For example, content, grammar, and orthography are points to observe. So students with the sample letter along with the checklist, they correct their own work. The teacher in turn oversees their work and also provides feedback and praise. That letter will be kept in a portfolio which can be accessed at any time to see students' progress. The purpose of this task is to assist students in becoming better at writing as well as to show them support and encouragement. Considering the profile of the class, which is a B2 level teenager class, we have designed an activity that will focus primarily on accuracy, formal speech and written production. It includes the following. First, a university admission letter. In this activity, students write down an admission letter to a fictional university. They receive the rubrics beforehand, and the teacher also provides some formal expressions that can be written down or written on the board, for example. However, students are encouraged to be creative about the reasons why they want to apply for that particular college. The second part is a self-assessment. So the teacher provides students with a sample letter and also a checklist that contains some key points. For example, content, grammar, orthography. So students can base their correction on those key points. The teacher in turn oversees their work and also answers questions that may arise and provides feedback and praise. The purpose of this activity is to assist students in becoming better at writing and also to show them support and encouragement. Now, the second part of the activity is a university admission interview. In this activity, students in pairs role play interviewer and interviewee. Interviewers are given questions to ask, and at this stage both self-assessments and peer feedback are used. In this way, once the first round of interviews is over, each interviewer asks their partner, "How do you think you did?" which is an important question which will allow students to reflect on their own performance. After that, roles are exchanged and also pairs are exchanged. Interviewers provide positive feedback and support. The teacher, in turn, takes notes of errors, and those errors will be revisited later with the entire class. The teacher can resort to visual aids, the whiteboard, and even a pre-recorded sample interview can be used if available. Open-ended questions might end the session to check understanding. The objective of the activity is now to avoid correcting students individually so that everyone may benefit from that activity. As student teachers, we are always eager to receive feedback and corrections. This is a crucial part of our learning experience because after all we learn things that we do not know. On this path, we have learned several things, and probably those which will be embedded in our memories will be those which have been properly corrected, not because of a grade or just for the sake of it, but because there was someone behind who wanted us to improve and achieve our goals. That is what we want to emulate. That is our objective. We hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Thank you very much.